have another 1 degree night or 0 night again. Every 3 days, the temperature drops off the table up here.
Well, I think it's 12:01, so we'll officially get started. My name's Wendy Pearson, and I am the director of the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives. And we are delighted to be presenting season 2 of our online poetry series. This season's theme is the refuge of witnessing. And I'd like to introduce and send my wholehearted gratitude to John Gillespie, who is the former president of the board here at the Library, Museum, and Archives. And he is a fan of poetry and put together this series 2 years running. So John, thank you so much. So glad to have you here. And also very glad to have with us today poet Kathyrn Petrucelli. Kathyrn, thank you for joining us. Kathyrn's joining us from Northampton, Mass. today. Just a few things about Kathyrn before we get officially rolling. Kathyrn is a bi-coastal performer, so here and out west. She is a writer with an MA in teaching English language learners. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in the New Ohio Review, Rattle, Things, River Teeth's Beautiful Things, sorry about that, December, Literary Mama, and Glass, a Journal of Poetry. Kathyrn is a past winner of San Francisco's Litquake Essay Contest and also a finalist for the 2019 Omni Dawn Broadside Poetry Prize. Kathyrn, a delight to have you here. Thanks for joining us. And I will turn the program over to you, John, and to you, Kathyrn.
Yeah, Wendy, thanks a lot. And Kathyrn, welcome back for season 2. We really enjoyed your reading in season 1.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's just start out with, what does refuge mean to you, or where do you personally find refuge? I know these things will seem very wide, but I'm sure they'll narrow pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think a lot of what this theme brought up for me had to do with scope, kind of zooming in and zooming out a lot, looking at the personal and looking at the larger world. And when you first posed it to me, I think the phrase you used was refuge of witnessing, which for language people, we could really get in there and start puzzling out like the semantics. So, well, okay. But yeah, if you want to start with refuge, and I'm sure this is a pretty well-trodden path for a lot of people that have already been on this series, but part of my refuge, of course, comes from working in the language, comes from that small space of the poem, and using language as the raft, I guess. And then when I kept thinking about this, more and more it kept coming to me. So I really want to thank you for, this complex sort of theme. But, refuge also for me is in the discovery, because I think of refuge as the thing that's going to carry you to the next moment or the next day, right? It's that thing that's going to support you and get you through. And so for me, I think the discovery, like the ahas, like as you're writing, that kind of joy and that kind of excitement is part of that propulsion. And then the discovery in, reading other people's work and being like, yeah, that's it. That's what I mean. So those are two places for sure. There are more.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. So, the refuge and the discovery and the kind of going from one place to another, does that, how does that show up in your writing? Or I always wonder, is that some kind of concept in your head where, hey, I'm going from place A to place B? Probably not. I mean, I'm the finance guy, so it's all digits and data. But I'm just wondering, are you always thinking about, I'm in the middle of going from one place to another when you're right? I'm just trying to figure out, how does that last part you talked about play out for you?
Yeah, well, you know, I might have like the day's news in my head, but I'm starting to write from my garden, you know, and I may stay in the garden ostensibly, or I may end up in a very different place than I began. I could read you a poem. It's not mine. Yep. I could read you one of my poems, but this isn't really where I was thinking of beginning, but that's the beauty of the conversation, right? So, yep. And it's sort of, I think it addresses this theme kind of directly in such a way. Let's see. Sorry, thought I had it marked. Give me a moment. This is, if I find it, from Maggie Smith's book, Goldenrod. And of course, it's like the one I didn't put the bookmark in. Hold on. I can just tell you too, while I'm sort of searching for this, you know, one of the things I found really interesting when I thought about it was my own journey with poetry began, I think, in this place around witness and witnessing. Because the very first class I took as like a post back in the early 90s, our teacher had us read Bruce Weigel, who is a Vietnam vet who's written a lot about Vietnam. And that's him. That's the book I read, The Song of Napalm. And Carolyn Forche, who spent, you know, her late 20s in El Salvador during their civil war. And both of those poets consider themselves poets of witness. So, so I found that really interesting, that was sort of my starting place. And it made a lot of sense to me because I was studying things like, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union and, you know, Latin American dictators and all kinds of dynamic things. I'm so sad that I thought it was just one page away from this one I have marked. You guys are so patient. Hold on. It's like the perfect. It speaks to landing where you didn't think you were going. All right, the best laid plans here, folks. I'm killing myself. Not cool. Okay, here we go.
All right.
It's called A Room Like This. I remember best your wild black hair, how newborn you even had sideburns, even little lashes on your forehead, your shoulders, your round face a red moon, the kind of warning sailors know well. I remember also your low, gruff cry, bear cub. You were a growling creature, all your own, not of my body the way they'd told me you would be. Not an organ removed, transplanted into air and fluorescence. I feel about birth the way I feel about death. It should not happen in a room like this, or any room. I want the smell of soil or salt air, dark pines, fire and hot stones, something elemental. You should look up and see not ceiling, at least not first or last on this earth. I began this poem thinking of you, who turned 7 just 2 days ago. And now I'm thinking, I don't want to die in a room. It is like my life, this poem. All this time, child, I've had no idea where it's going.
Very nice.
So that's Maggie Smith.
Nice.
And I'd love to read you a poem from the Bruce Weigel book, because I feel like it encompasses both refuge and witnessing together. And I think you'll see what I mean when you hear it.
Yeah, right.
It comes from the end, almost the end of the book, but it's actually has to do with when he first left for Vietnam. And it's called The Kiss. All the goodbyes said and done, I climbed into the plane and sat down. From the cold, I was shaking and ached to be away from the love of those waving through the frozen window. Once as a boy, I was lost in a storm, funnel cloud twisting so near, I was pitched from my bicycle into the ditch. Picked up by the wind and yellow sky, my arms before me, feeling my way through the wind, I could not cry above. Out of that black air of debris, out of nowhere, my father bent down, lifted me, and ran to the house of strangers. And again, that day on the plane, he appeared to me, my forgotten orders in his hands. He bent down to put the envelope in my lap. On my lips, he kissed me hard, and without a word, he was gone into the cold again. Through the jungle, through the highlands, through all that green dying, I touched my fingers to my lips.
Wow. Whew. Ooh. Very nice.
Yeah, so I think that I think another part of refuge for me is the authenticity, the truth telling that poetry provides. Because even when it's hard to look at, I would rather look and be supported in the beauty of the words and the smallness of the moment, than be, shuffled under the rug, like we're so good at doing in American society. Poetry takes paradox and, just throws its arms wide for it, right? It doesn't have to answer the questions. It just has to pose them. It doesn't have to, make something into something it's not. We can shed sort of the public persona and be real, and that's a refuge.
Yeah, nice. So last week I asked this question, just kind of came up. Do you think people, and obviously the last 2 years has been undescribable, but do you think people are more likely to seek refuge now, or do they have to be kind of pushed off a cliff? And refuge is the bottom of the cliff, so all of a sudden you're going to crash into, you're going to be in refuge without willingness. I'm just wondering if you think people are more likely to be seeking refuge now, or are they maybe, I don't know. I just don't know if things have kind of shifted a bit.
In how we think about what we want, like whether we escape or we face it, or
it's like the people need to recharge more, to be more, to, who knows, like for me, it's spending more time reading poetry or calling a friend. Are we engaging in more what we would call our self-refuge activities, where before, our busy life, make money, raise kids, it's like a treadmill. And now, there's kind of on the treadmill, and now there's off the treadmill. And I'm just wondering if people have the ability, they do have the ability to take care of themselves more. Maybe I'm just making stuff up. I'm just wondering. For me, I find myself seeking opportunities for refuge, because I'm working full time and doing other things. Part of it is I need that place. I need that experience. I'm just wondering if other people are more likely to do that now after the last couple of years. Just your opinion,
Yeah.
that's all.
I mean, my opinion is that I think that more people are doing that. I hope more people are doing that. I don't think we're ever going to, you know, we're never going to fall into the utopia of like, oh my gosh, you know, the dumb humans have figured it out. It's the moment, you know, it's
Yeah.
that's not on the horizon. But I do think that more people are. I think just the popularity of poetry in these times, and you know, necessity, to some degree, has sort of brought us there. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there some of your work where refuge is a theme that you could share one of your poems with us?
Sure. I can share some refuge. Well, so one of my refuges, refugii. One place I take refuge is in the natural world. Um,
Love it, refuge.
so,
It's a new English word now.
there you go. Okay, I'll read you this one. It's called That Was the Summer. And I'll send this out to Elliot because it began in his garden. That was the summer I learned to speak with the hummingbirds. They crowded into my days, small and plentiful, chirping from the garden trellis, motoring to and from the echeveria flowers. I learned their language as you might any language, by listening, copying, by pointing while they nodded and repeated the words. They came whenever they could. They were busy, barrel rolling through sunbeams, checking on things. Tiny mayors attending to their cities. We talked about Nicotiana blossoms, how one holds the body apart from what is being consumed. About azalea, bee balm, salvia. We talked about redwoods and the traffic and cats. I told them how I'd been thinking lately of Ireland and Tuscany, and they understood completely. Foxglove and lavender, they agreed. We often mentioned wings and windows, debated the ideal length of the tongue. Eventually, I abandoned meals, messages piled unread, every minute spent in the garden hanging on their counsel, iridescent monks practicing vows of constant motion. All summer long they hummed, scrawling their signature onto wide sky, nectar-driven teachers of song.
Yeah. I think Elliot, I think we're getting yeah.
Well, thanks.
I think we're gonna do a poetry bus tour and go to Elliot's garden. I think that's what's next on the Elliot, that'll be season 3, the bus tour. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's great you brought up the concept. It did start out as the refuge of witnessing, and how, you know, witnessing life or witnessing and speaking up, it gives us sort of a refuge. But I think we've had those concepts together, and then some people say that they're opposites. So we've kind of, you know, split the infinitive, whatever you want to call it. But no, it's interesting. I'm and you know, I like refuge. Obviously that's a good. I'm gonna put that in my vocabulary now. So just the witnessing, tell us a little bit more. And once again, this for people, you know, some people were on last week. You know, the whole purpose of this is, besides it's really to get to know the poet in a deeper way. You know, obviously to hear your thoughts about things, you know, other people's poems, your poem. So that's really the focus of this season. So where does witnessing show up in some of your work now? Is that is, I know, listen, truth telling, obviously observing what's going on. I just didn't know, big theme, or it's always an underlying theme. I'm just trying to see how that works for you in your
Yeah,
poem.
well, I could read you, let me read you a new piece of mine that I think, sort of pans out to a bigger issue that is on my mind. And then maybe I could also read some things that deal with witness in sort of a forward-thinking way. So I'm thinking about how we can rethink traditions, we can rethink programming, cultural programming, I'll call it, to create a different future. And so sometimes to do that, you need to see where you are first,
Yeah.
and in an honest way that creates a foundation, and then move away from it. So well, I'll read you this poem first, that's called Leaf Blower at the Hotel. Leaf blowers, I have actually tried to write many poems about the leaf blower. The leaf blower is like, evil. But this took me, again, in a place that it took me to a place I didn't anticipate when I began. And that is sort of how some of it arrives, right? It shows up if it's in your heart. So this is Leaf Blower at the Hotel. Motor unmistakable in its searching. Not a tree I can see anywhere in the barren parking lot. How many refugee leaves could have wandered into the carefully marked asphalt graves, among which the black Tahoe with tinted windows is the only occupant, besides the van from, I see it just now, Darby and Sons Pest Control. And from my window, built only as taunt, never meant to be opened, I barely catch the visage of the one burdened with a backpack, a ruddy-faced man in thick plaid, engineering along, hose in his hand, remnant of an animal from some long extinct landscape. Maybe when he was young, he wanted to be a superhero with a jetpack or a Ghostbuster, and this is the closest he got. Shadow trajectory, a step to the left of the life desired. And what if leaf blowers are here to teach us, are really humanity's cry for help, illuminating this point we've arrived at, where we pull off the highway to stay in rooms scoured of breath, getting out of motorized beasts we direct through others' beastly contraptions, each with its own microclimate, and places to put the lattes, and some with TVs in the back, so our progeny don't have to look out the window, even though they could. These windows open, the touch of a button. We get out and are so lost, standing in the quiet on our 2 feet, powered by what? Aching for the roar, what rummages through the clutter of the world, so much of it. Leaves, falling and falling, unable to remain where they were born, knowing they are dying there, and we'll do anything to show the new arrivals whose ground this is, who was here first, how we clean up what dares encroach. These changes of season we had nothing to do with, that we want no part of. And sure, we planted the tree, but that doesn't mean we're responsible for all this mess.
Nice. Very good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things of landing far from where you begin, right? Which is also a hopeful thing. I can get you a copy. It's a hopeful thing to think that we can emerge somewhere completely different from where we start, because that's what we need right now, right?
Yep.
We need a solution that we can't yet see, that we don't yet know about. But I think that poetry helps us build steps toward some new and different imagining, right? Which is what I was saying about kind of looking at our foundations, and then moving from that to what else we want, recognizing what is programming as programming, and moving ahead. So let me see if I can find let me read
And your leaf blower, there's a audience demand for the leaf blower poem to basically instruct their husbands or significant others to abandon those machines of trouble.
Yeah. Noise is something that I can deal with less and less as the older I get. Yeah, so I'm going to read you a couple of poems, if that's okay. John, am I doing okay? Is this how it's supposed to go?
Oh yeah, I don't know. We'll be voting. Obviously, it'll be like on a international Twitter feed. No, we're not. Yeah, listen, this is about freedom. This is about.
Love that.
I know it's always scary, because I think when you get into this reading mode, I don't know if it's linear where you're going to read one, you're just going to go down the path. We're just going where it goes. So listen, I'd love to hear the poems that come to mind based on our conversation before and our conversation today.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'll read you a couple of mine, and then actually I want to read you a Ross Gay poem, which is one of my favorite poems in the world. So in terms of where we start, this is, it's called American Childhood. This is mine. Patty and I played together every day, like on the rusted metal swing set in my backyard, the bench swing with its two seats facing each other, where we played Subway, though neither of us had ever been on one. We were 5, 6 maybe, Long Island kids who watched too much TV, heard our parents talk about the city. We played close to the Meltzer's fence in case Mrs. Meltzer was outside and had lollipops. We played around the wood pile after the big oak came down. I don't remember a tree missing. In those days, they seemed to be everywhere, huge, hugging us in, guardians. Until the time Patty wanted to take home the odd piece of log we both thought looked like a gun. I said no, it was mine. I'd learned already about possession, about what held currency beyond the trees. It was the mid-70s. We were cradled in a valley between. The Kennedys were dead. Martin, Malcolm. But up the other side, John Lennon and Marvin Gaye still had a few years left to imagine what was going on. Patty asked again. I said no again. We fought about it. She rushed away in tears. I held the gun in my hand, closed one eye, aimed it at her back as she ran. Oh yes, the United States of America.
Well, I'm going to avoid your backyard. I think that once again, I learned everything from one of your poems. So I'm avoiding your backyard. Wendy, let's make sure we get the address in Northampton so we can exit out of our GPS.
That's right. Yeah. You now that you know
now that I know the backyard is dangerous.
That backyard is long gone.
Yeah.
But so some of the kind of moving ahead into a different future and letting go of some of the stuff we would like to flush out or remake, has to do with what I like to call in my poems female agency. So some might call it feminist. I feel like the word has become a little inadequate, but female agency is maybe more accurate to what I'd like to portray in some of my work. And so I have a very short poem that ends actually with a line by Sharon Olds. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with the Sharon Olds poem, I Go Back to May 1937. It's a well-known poem of hers. I'd encourage you to look for it. It's amazing. And in that poem, she imagines her parents. She goes back in her mind to when her parents met at the college gates, and she wants to tell them, don't do it. You're wrong for each other. You'll do terrible things, And then as the poem goes on, then she says, but I want to live. And the final line of her poem is the final line of my poem here. So this is called Dream of Eve, ending with a line by Sharon Olds. I've come to warn her. Find her at the end of a twisting path, the animals gathered, archipelago of perfect purple clouds. People for millennia will fear you, the strength of your spine, ease of agency. She turns a ripe cheek my way, placid splendor, the smallest witchy twitch of her brow. I nod. Do what you are going to do, and I will tell about it. Ooh, the quiet of the Zoom room. Okay.
Well, I think Karen was here last week. We had a lot of touchdown signs. We had a lot of laughs. Yeah, last week was like a New Year's Eve party. Yeah, we had a sedate Angela before the session was over to kind of like get it back to, you have to end up in reality, right? Only kidding.
Yeah. I know, right? Yeah. Perhaps. So let me see how I can introduce this Ross Gay poem. Yeah, okay. So, I feel like we shouldn't be afraid in these times of joy and of claiming joy and feeling joy. And so Ross Gay is sort of known, if like Carolyn Forche and Bruce Weigel are the poets of witness, Ross Gay is the poet of joy. Like that is what he has, a label he has taken on, not a bad one, I imagine. And that doesn't mean it's a sort of a Pollyanna approach, but it's still joy, and that's one of those things where it's one of those moments where poetry just holds it all. It holds it all in the same space. Whatever is creeping around the edges and whatever we want to celebrate. So if you're not familiar with Ross Gay, his poems tend to be these rhapsodic kind of flowing things, and so this is the first poem in his book, Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. And it's called To the Fig Tree on 9th and Christian. Tumbling through the city in my mind without once looking up, the racket in the lugwork, probably rehearsing some stupid thing I said or did, some crime or other. The city, they say, is a lonely place until, yes, the sound of sweeping, and a woman, yes, with a broom beneath, which you are now too, the canopy of a fig, its arms pulling the September sun to it. And she has a hose too, and so works hard, rinsing and scrubbing the walk, lest some poor sod slip on the silk of a fig and break his hip, and not probably reach over to gobble up the perpetrator. The light catches the veins in her hands. When I ask about the tree, they flutter in the air, and she says, take as much as you can, help me. So I load my pockets and mouth, and she points to the stepladder against the wall to mean more, but I was without a sack, and so my meager plunder would have to suffice. And an old woman whom gravity was pulling into the earth loosed one from a low-slung branch, and its eye wept like hers, which she dabbed with a kerchief as she cleaved the fig with what remained of her teeth. And soon there were 8 or 9 people gathered beneath the tree, looking into it like a constellation, pointing, do you see it? And I am tall and so good for these things. And a bald man even told me so when I grabbed 3 or 4 for him, reaching into the giddy throngs of yellow jackets, sugar stoned, which he only pointed to, smiling and rubbing his stomach. I mean, he was really rubbing his stomach like there was a baby in there, and it was hot. His head shone while he offered recipes to the group using words which I couldn't understand. And besides, I was a little tipsy on the dance of the velvety heart rolling in my mouth, pulling me down and down into the oldest countries of my body, where I ate my first fig from the hand of a man who escaped his country by swimming through the night, and maybe never said more than 5 words to me at once, but gave me figs. And a man on his way to work hops twice to reach at last his fig, which he smiles at and calls baby. Come here, baby, he says, and blows a kiss to the tree, which everyone knows cannot grow this far north, being Mediterranean and favoring the rocky, sun-baked soils of Jordan and Sicily. But no one told the fig tree or the immigrants. There is a way the fig tree grows in groves it wants, it seems, to hold us. Yes, I am anthropomorphizing, goddammit. I have twice in the last 30 seconds rubbed my sweaty forearm into someone else's sweaty shoulder, gleeful eating out of each other's hands on Christian Street in Philadelphia, a city like most, which has murdered its own people. This is true. We are feeding each other from a tree at the corner of Christian and 9th, strangers maybe, never again.
Wow. How do you spell that person's name?
Ross, R-O-S-S, Gay, G-A-Y. He's lovely. I've seen him read in person, and he's one of those people that you just want to be in the presence of. He sort of gives off this magical aura. He's charming. Let's see. Wow. When you said freedom, you meant freedom. Let me read a pandemic poem to you. How's that?
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think I'll say anything to introduce it. I'll just read it to you. It's called Daal, as in D-A-A-L, the food, / in the midst of the pandemic. And that second part, in the midst of the pandemic, serves as also essentially the first line, bleeds into the first line of the poem. So I wrote this during the first year. Wow, it's amazing that we have to mark it now, right? We have to clarify. This was probably the first pandemic poem I wrote, and yeah, during the first spring of the pandemic. Daal, in the midst of the pandemic. It began to snow, the weather having no use for calendars nor mercy. After erasing the spring crocuses, it continued, flakes that could scarcely be called so, weighty pairings, dressed in slippery white taffeta that landed with purpose on the street, the wheelbarrow, the Adirondack chair placed at a hopeful angle to look out over the greening patch of grass. Yesterday's melodies were quiet, quick sparrows, sticks in their beaks, missing. I watched the snow fall from the kitchen window, the world smothered in a monochrome, a sameness, as I measured the lentils, minced the garlic and ginger, let the oil rise to a shine in the heat of the pan. It fell harder, and I sprinkled the turmeric, inhaled the scent of mustard seed, split the chilies. Even the air itself whitened then, swirling with worry, while I willed to my mind's eye saris swishing through markets, their fabrics breezy periwinkles trimmed in gold, rich chocolates and maroons shot through with chartreuse, their wearers selecting from sacks, dolls in velvet black or peachy orange. How to feel what is in the world and yet keep our colors alive. We must trust the beauty to make a nest so grand as to harbor also the cold. The aromas of curry, currants, cumin danced defiant under my nose, while the sky wept the same sad song. In some parts of the world, dal is fed to mourners, the lentil said to resemble the wheel of sorrow that touches each of us in turn. I sit my family at the table, serve them heaps of steaming stew, tell them to eat and eat until they are full.
Very nice, very nice.
Thank you. Very kind. Yeah. So it's, we're sort of, I guess we're testing in this second year or rolling towards the dawn of the third year of the pandemic. I guess we're testing out all those things that we felt in the first year. Can we hold this moment as precious? Can we appreciate the gifts that have arrived through this experience? Or is it becoming the water that we swim in? So I don't know, but I think that's one of the freedoms of poetry, right? Is to see that water and then kind of hold it out so that others see it.
Yeah, I think the water, yeah. At least up here in Maine, the water's everywhere. So I think the challenge for me and for my wife Linda is, every time you go somewhere, think about going somewhere, there's a set of questions you have to ask yourself. What kind of mask do you have? Is anyone else going to be there? So I guess the spontaneity of deciding to go to the store or going out to lunch becomes a 10-question Q&A. So the whole thing is we're just swimming in the water. It's new water.
Yeah. So maybe we're more thoughtful humans. Maybe that's a good thing. I wish I could keep up with the chat. I'm so sorry.
No, the chat. No, the chat is. No, it's. Kerry said the Sharon Rose poem was a great choice. Wendy posted the Ross Gay, the Book of Delights. Rebecca Rose Langston, beautiful. It's a good sign that I keep wanting to get a copy of your poems. Karen, the contrast between the snow at the making of the doll, the ongoing pandemic, and your pandemic poem was so visceral and deeply moving. Wow. And I can, grab a copy of all the chat things. So no, everyone's, obviously leaf blower is leading the way. Doll coming up. Yeah, Doll coming up close second, but leaf blower is still rounding the clubhouse turn, as we say.
Yes, please make it a competition. We must. This is America. So I'm going to read an older poem to you, because one of the refuge, we can keep talking forever about, what constitutes refuge, what constitutes witness. But one more piece of the refuge puzzle for me, of course, and I'm guessing for lots of people, even lots of people that wouldn't name it so, or be conscious of it, is of course connection and community. And it's exactly that that's fraught now. So how do we deal with that? But again, I don't, we've got lots of time. Think about it.
Yep.
And this poem was written well before the pandemic and shows that we were never that great at it to begin with, if you believe the truths of the poem. So we're troubled but trying. There's a lot of hope in the poetry that I gravitate to read and hopefully to write. So this is one of mine called Moving the Piano. It takes almost nothing to step into each other's lives. A favor for a neighbor, a huge upright Steinway, there's no one left to play. All morning they labored together, the men, everything they could think of to get it out of the van and over the curb, metal ramp, wooden boards, a jack, the old bed frame from behind the garage. Dave had never asked my husband for anything before. The house he'd grown up in was already packed, mementos sold, his mother's mind skipping liberally among the decades, her fingers running through chords in the air or waltzing grandly through measures of Chopin. His father, stooped from his own burdens, aged beyond his years, nodding when people talked about his new facility, so highly regarded, so clean. There was sweat, grunting. My husband mumbled a curse as they argued about angles, pushed their charge up the cracked walkway, 3 shallow steps to the porch. And because we have no better idea how to be with each other in our pain, when they'd finally struggled the monstrous instrument into Dave's house, they could only wipe their hands on their jeans, crack their knuckles, and share a pizza, which they ate standing in the kitchen, hunched over its grease-stained box.
Nice. Very nice. So Kathyrn, just before you continue for a sec, I just wanted to let everyone know, if you would like to be on our mailing list, we send out a weekly email that has the recording from, it'll be the recording from this week, and we'll have the preview for the next week. Put your email in the chat. I'll put my email in the chat if you want to email me later, and we'll add you to the list. We don't use it for anything else. We just send out the weekly poetry email. That's it. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm aware of the time too, John, and feel free to, take it wherever you need to take it. But I could offer, this is a new poem. I might as well out myself, even though my husband is lurking on the call. But he's probably just writing code and not listening. So I'll give this a whirl. He hasn't heard this. It's called Post Argument on the 10th anniversary of our son's heart surgery. And it has an epigraph from the poet Jennifer Chang. She said in one of her poems, "I want to love honestly. I want love honest." Post argument on the 10th anniversary of our son's heart surgery. Do you want to take a walk this morning, you ask? And I know you mean, are you still upset? I'm looking for a way to talk to you that doesn't involve talking. If I read you this poem, you won't get it. And I'll have to stuff the gap with hope or something like love. Love as belief, as the rushing air we move through before the landing, as desire for quiet, my own heart driving away the dark. You want me to explain what I'm angry about, but I'm tired of explaining. I'm angry about how tired I am of explaining. I say yes to the walk, even though I know it will look like you pretending everything is fine and me acting annoyed at the pretense. Maybe what the poet means is look away, never look away. The years are water, weather, the years swelter in the heat of love's debris. If I were to pry open my chest, lie splayed, a book, a novel self, it wouldn't help. No one receives the same words. What is left but to laugh at the buoyant fools we were when we met, the ones we've grown into, our patched hearts, lain over with foreign matter that beat stronger for it.
What's the name of that one again?
Post-argument on the 10th anniversary of our son's heart surgery.
Oh, that was great. The first few lines were fantastic. Really nice.
Thank you.
Before I want to just ask the audience if they have any questions. I feel like some, we're kind of just meandering purposefully around this hour, and there's a lot of things that have been said in chat. But does anyone have a particular question for Kathyrn? I just want to give you that opportunity, because all of a sudden the time will evaporate and that time will not be available. So we'll just let people think about that for.
I have a question. How closely do your first drafts of your poems resemble the finished product? Like, is there a ton of revision or not, or does it depend on the poem?
It very much depends on the poem. So sometimes, they can spill out and not change that much. I mean, I'll say not change that much, but to my mind, they do change because I'm constantly changing line breaks. I'm constantly swapping out words, but maybe the kernel of it remains. Other times, I write it down and I really don't know. I might believe in a couple of lines strongly enough to want to salvage it, to keep it, but I don't know really what it wants to grow up to be yet. So it can be super different. And it's, I start everything with pen and paper. I know it's probably like not that weird to this crowd, but I swear, like I was tutoring a 13-year-old. He literally, the child does not use a pen, like refuses. Like, he has dysgraphia, so there's other things involved. Like he, doesn't write well, but I was just like, dear Lordy. So like, I start longhand, and when the scratches, become, prevalent enough that I can't really read it off the page anymore, then I type it and I print it, but then I print it and I'm again sort of, going at it with a pen. It's really different. Yeah. But a lot of tweaking for sure. As anybody.
I'm just saving the chat stuff. So we have a little less than 5 minutes, or really 4 minutes. There are a couple of poems you want to close us out with, or
sure.
Look out into your backyard, see if anyone's lurking around the wood pile. I think that's also it's a good Misha's on the call. Misha knows I'm a little bit of a security freak, so I'm always checking to make sure the doors are locked at night. So now I'm going to be looking out the windows before after the door locks, just to make sure there's no one lurking. So
yeah, sure. Let me gosh, okay. Yeah, all right. I'll read a poem since we were talking about writing. I'll read this poem, and because I feel like this is something going by the wayside. This poem was inspired by, those little scraps of paper you might find like that fall out of a library book or something, that somebody else's list or something. So that's what inspired this, along with this quote. I'm obsessed, some of you know, with the alphabet. I go right to the source. It's like language, words, no, letters, and the history of letters. So this starts with an epigraph by Kaveh Akbar. And he says, mostly I want to be letters, not their sounds, but their shapes on a page. It must be exhilarating to be a symbol for everything at once. The bone caught in a child's windpipe, the venom hiding in a snake's jaw. This poem is called Call Helen. I too have longed to hold the power in the suggestion of line and curve. The signs are all around us. Exit, they counsel. Break in case of emergency. Warning, the shapes spell out. Pull. Who would think to disobey? Still, nothing can surpass the ecstasy of whispers found on sidewalks, in parking lots, scribbled by hand on little slips of no consequence, fallen from the library book. Call Helen, they say. Mustard, bread, bananas, they say. Single petals, flecks of light, evidence of stardust, pockmarked with gravel or written on an envelope flap, the glue on the reverse side, gummy and yellowed. Bank, gas, Janet's birthday. I aspire to embody for a moment these missiles of shaky ink, beautiful cones, windows into tenderness that is not mine, and mine all the same, directives teeming with hope and regret, memoirs in micro, missing all the ugly bits. No venom, no bone. Card for Nona, stamps. So that is Call Helen.
now, quickly before we exit, tell us your website.
Oh, sure. So it's poetroar.com, as in roar, POETROAR.com.
And I know you have some writing workshops. If you go to poetroar.com, you can find out your writing workshops. So I want to make sure we mentioned that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would love to have you, Karen. Yeah. So I teach 6-week workshops, sort of ongoing, but we do them in 6-week sessions. And the format is that we do a little warm up together, which plays with some sort of element of craft. And then we have 1 or 2 poems that we look at that week. And I'm always driven by the poem. So if I'm in love with the poem and I really want to share it, that's going to be what I pick. And then we look at that, or I look at that ahead, to say, okay, what could we teach from this? Where could we go with this? And I create kind of in-depth prompts around, springboarding off of those poems. But we really look at, the context around what we can talk about. And then there's live writing time and we share.
Nice. Very good. Oh, Wendy, I think we're at the end of our hour. We've used up the whole time capsule here.
I think we have. It was a wonderful hour. Kathyrn, thank you so much. Your poetry is amazing. And I'm also really moved by the choices you made of other poets' work. So thank you for all of it. I put your website in the chat box. Stockbridge Library website is in the chat box as well for people who'd like to listen to this recording or other poetry sessions. And I want to thank our wonderful audience and look forward to seeing you next week for more poetry.
Yeah, Kathyrn, thanks again.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
John. It was really fun.
Oh,
Thanks
no.
so